Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of True Detective, episode 5. I love this chilling opening we got of Julia's skull being incinerated. Seeing the process of the incineration reminded me of an opening you'd see in Better Call Saul, and I thought it actually really worked here. What I did not think worked was at the end of the scene, where it was just awkward how Navarro hugged the urn of her ashes. I thought that was very strange, and how it just like abruptly cut to the opening credits. But we see at the end of the credits, the teaser this time is actually the meeting place of where we'll see later on Hank and Kate meeting up. Now, in this first scene, we see Danvers is interrogating Otis, and he brings up the line, "She's awake," and it triggers Danvers. But what I found frustrating about this is that where here she thought of Holden saying it to her, why didn't she react this way when she originally saw the video of Clark saying she's awake in the lab? She did see that, and that was after the dream she had about Holden saying it. So it was bizarre that it only translated to her here but not before. But Clark had told Otis that he had to hide and that she was out there, whoever this she is. Now, he sustained the injury 30 years ago. A cave-in happened where men died trapped in the ice, and they ran out for help, but there was this blizzard, and they heard screaming and howling. And when he went after the men who followed the sounds, he woke up in the hospital, Otis. So when he's telling this story, you're also hearing voices again under all of this story happening and murmuring, and it's interesting because then you're wondering, whatever this entity was that scared them or whatever they heard, is this the same way the researchers went out? Is that kind of our reveal here? And it would make sense in the theme of the show, and a lot in this episode is going back to season 1 with the time as a flat circle, but things repeating themselves, so it would make sense that the same kind of incident happened 30 years earlier that happened to the researchers now. But he points on the map where the cave entrance is, and like Bryce in the previous episode points out how dangerous it is, so Danvers wants him to lead the way, but he wants in return heroin. Now, when Danvers and Navarro first go to see the cave entrance, it is blocked now, and they also learn it's on Silver Sky property. And what was interesting on their way to the cave entrance, that Danvers brings up to Navarro how Lee has become radical now and crazy, but Navarro points out that it's not crazy, and it reminds her that the water poisoning is happening to the indigenous section of this town, and Danvers like, I know. So this is something that she has to face that's tugging at her. And like I said in my earlier reviews, that Peter was going to have a moment of facing his father or Danvers and make that choice. It's a crossroads for him, and that was always tugging at him to go towards Danvers. And that kind of tug is happening here, which I think will get its full payoff in the finale, where Danvers is getting tugged by Lee, and Lee showing her the truth and making that change and growth in Danvers' character. Now, Kayla will throw Peter out, and Peter goes to Hank's to stay there, but before he even calls him, he hears him singing inside. This looks like to be a John Hawke original. He is a musician. He is the actor who plays Hank. I thought it was great. And while I was hearing it, I was wondering, why didn't they just use this for the intro music for the show? It sounds so much like a True Detective song, so that seems like a bizarre miss right there, but that must be something coming down from the studio about getting Billie Eilish in to attract the younger viewers. Who knows? And it would be so much more haunting having a character in the show who's a sinister character we know now singing the opening song. Now, we're talking about that theme of time being a flat circle, and like Rust had always said, that things happen again. They always come back and happen. There's always going to be people kidnapped. It's just going to keep going on no matter what you try to stop. And right here, you're seeing a reflection of the past where basically Lee is taking the role of Annie in these protests. They're protesting the mine, and that is why you see Navarro see the vision of Annie there. It's reminding her of that situation, and it's why it scares Danvers for Lee's life because of what ended up happening to Annie. But this scene, I just also thought it felt a little bizarre how like Navarro teleported there in a different outfit, already ready to go, when she was just at the caves with Danvers. Just with the editing, it felt a little abrupt. Now, the police start hitting Lee. This is where Navarro protects her, but her girlfriend Sherry leaves. Like, when it matters most, she pieces out. And Danvers wants Lee brought in, so she really learns the lesson now. Now, Peter tells Danvers he got kicked out, and she says, need a place to stay? Okay, Miss Robinson, I see you. Maybe Hank was right. But we learn again more about Tuttle United, which goes back to season 1, and the Tuttle cult you always think about with Tuttle United, and the pedophile cult they had going, and it's connected to Silver Sky Mining, and the mine bankrolls the research center, they learn. So that research center can put false pollution numbers out for the mine. It's total corruption. Now, we'll see, speaking of Silver Sky, that Kate Connolly and Danvers meet there, and Kate doesn't like Danvers and Navarro snooping on their territory where that cave entrance was. You knew it was bad for Kate and how bad Kate is in all this when she specifically asked who the engineer was to Danvers, and she gives him the name, which actually shocked me. And Connolly reveals the lab results came back from Anchorage. You knew when the bodies were going to go to Anchorage, the case was going to get messed up, and they're kind of covering up here as an avalanche and that they froze to death, but we know that's not the case. Remember what the vet said, that they did not freeze to death. And this is what angers Danvers, that they're clearly covering this up, and she points out the conflict of interest here with the mine and the research center and the funding. But this is where Connolly will bring up, basically as blackmail to Danvers, he knows what happens for real in the Wheeler case from the past, and that's why he says case closed. He's saying case closed about the research center, case closed about Annie, to drop it. And this will spook Danvers. Now, right after this, we'll see a big reveal that Kate meets with Hank now. So I'd said in my episode review that obviously Hank was super suspicious. This wasn't a big reveal. You knew he was up to something and that he was corrupt in some way. Not the big bad, but he was serving something and he knew more than he was leading on. So we get that answer. You see Kate's like, Danvers won't let this go. She can't find that cave. So it's also revealing that Kate is corrupt, which isn't a surprise either. Again, you know, all we knew of her character is that she worked for the mine, so you knew something was bad there. And it basically confirms Annie was there, like it will confirm later on when Hank reveals he actually did move the body. We learn Hank was originally promised money, which he got, but he was also promised chief of police, which he never got. So then that was messed up because Danvers showed up. Thank God Danvers showed up. And he says, I'm not a killer. And that's where Kate's like, oh no, Otis is a drug addict. Drug addicts get lost. She says, you do this, the job is yours now, the chief of police. So Hank is in denial about being culpable and inadvertently being a killer type. And those kind of lines about talking like drug addicts ain't lost, it also helps justify like they're a piece of meat for him to shoot someone like Otis later on. Now, Navarro's visions are worsening as this episode goes on, and you see that she finds hair in the washing machine. And this is where Eddie's co-worker will tell Navarro that the spiral stone was left as warning for hunters, spots where ice would swallow them whole, and it would lead to underground ice caves. And he says that his grandma said the night country was going to take them if they went down there. It's interesting that she said this to kids. I hope that to pay off the tease of the spiral so much in the season, that the ice caves below, this night country talk, I hope it connects to the pedophilia ring, because otherwise it feels like another huge tease but meaning something completely different, which I'm not crazy about, because then it just was so much in your face this season that I hope it actually ties. I actually think it will, though. I think that's what's going to end up, they're going to find down here. And I think that's what Annie found and got her killed. Now, Danvers fills in Navarro about the terrible situation they're in, that Connolly figured out what they did, and she's like, we got to stop, you know, the cases are done. But that's where Navarro's like, you carry Annie every day now, you're leaving her alone in that cave in the dark. And she's right. And this is what we talked about in episode 1, that important scene where Navarro says to Danvers, you carry all of them, and she's like, no you don't. But you do. And then Danvers knew that deep down, and now she's really seeing that. I also think it's interesting that Hank brings up to Peter this story about when he fell through the ice when he was 9 years old. We actually see visually Hank hitting the ice with his axe, trying to get him out, but we don't see anything else, which I think is important. We don't see anything else. We don't see little Peter here. That makes me wonder, has Peter seen the night country and he's blurted out of his mind? Has he been in those ice caves? My sister and my brother-in-law, I'm going to give them a shout out. They also had a great theory. They were telling me they're fully in on the belief that Peter is behind the deaths at the research center and that he was the one running through the hallway. And that there's been a lot of moments of Peter that seem suspicious, and it would make sense that Hank was frustrated so much with Peter by just covering up everything for him and that he knew he was involved too. It's an interesting theory, and it could totally still be the case here that he is the big reveal, because I still think there's obviously a big twist we're going to get in this finale of someone else involved. It can't just be Hank as the character we've seen a lot. That is the big twist. That would be kind of a letdown. And we've seen moments of Peter when he was first texting Danvers and Kayla's trying to kiss him. He's pretty hostile with her, and he was also not crazy about his son drawing pictures from the grandma. So it's a lot of things pointing towards like, yeah, there is some suspicious stuff with Peter, and he does give off a little bit of some psycho vibes, so we'll see. Now, Rose and Navarro go to bury the ashes in the ice to connect to the ocean, And these are the ashes of Julia's, obviously. But Navarro goes into a trance here, almost falls in the ice herself. But we see that military scene again, so that's going to be interesting to reveal how that connects to everything, because I can't really figure out in the back of my head like why this is so important that we keep seeing this. But we do see there was a flipped car at the military scene, so that probably explains that in that flip, maybe she caused it somehow, and that happened to her partner where her face was all messed up. So we'll see how that all connects. It could just be that she's just seeing trauma in this area of the ice that gives you visions of your past. Now we're talking about character growth and character change. A very important scene I really liked in this episode was actually when Leah's in the tub and she's talking to Danvers, and she's reminding her like about the amount of stillbirths that are happening, and points out there's literally 9 that have happened in the past couple months. 9 moms. It's forcing that change and growth, and only someone as good as a Jodie Foster can show that in her face without saying a word, seeing the conflict in her mind, thinking as her character. And I love the line Lee says to her. She's not ready to come back and live with her, but she's like, Liz, you know I haven't given up on you. So it's good to see a character like Lee still having belief, even though she's so frustrated in Danvers. And I'm sure the payoff for all this growth is going to come when Danvers will have to face a crossroads in the finale and have to kind of put aside the badge for a second and do what's right for these people. Now, we'll see Hank here starts to trail Danvers. So this is where stuff starts cooking. And I also liked here a lot, this scene, because it's showing you something you never really think about unless you live somewhere Arctic like Alaska. But this graveyard, and you see the gravedigger says it's 3 months till we can dig any more graves. So you didn't even think about that. Like, oh wow, that's crazy that there's places like that that have to deal with that. And it leads to a powerful visual for Danvers to see of the little coffins. I thought that was very, very effective and very interesting, and makes you think a lot, and it really forces Danvers to face this. And again, talking about just facing things she originally had trouble looking at. Now, back at the police station, Danvers connects the dots of how Connolly figured out what happened with Wheeler. That Hank squealed to Connolly, but how did Hank find out? Hank found out through Peter and his laptop. And Peter stupidly put the password as his son's birthday. And this was originally Hank opening the laptop because he's just snooping to see what they know about the mine. Because we know he's in on this corruption. Peter figured out that they flipped the photos. What Danvers forgot to consider in her cover-up in Navarro with what really happened to Wheeler is that he was left-handed. That's how Peter figured out the photos were flipped, because the bruise marks didn't match the swing of a left-handed person, and then that showed that they had flipped the photo of the bullet wound. It wasn't on the side that made it look like a suicide. He was shot. But this isn't a big reveal here. Clearly, he didn't kill himself. We knew that from the first flashback because they didn't show it happen. So maybe it was a little over-pushed, like this was a big moment, but I was okay with it in the sense that this wasn't the big moment and the big reveal of the episode. There's other stuff that's been revealed, and the big moment comes later on. So I didn't feel as like, oh, maybe that was a little like flat of a reveal. No, I think that was just building up to what was going to happen next. So I actually thought it worked here. And it makes Peter so angry at his father, being a rat about this, not talking to Peter about it, and snooping. It hurts his relationship with Danvers, who he truly cares about and cares about that relationship. I mean, that relationship with Danvers, he has started to put over everything else, even his own family. Now, Danvers gets Otis the fix he needs. Before she actually gives it to him, he's got to show her on the map the highest point so they can find these caves. And he does point to them, so they did get that important information before he'd obviously get killed by Hank. But when Hank shows up to Danvers, this is the best scene in the show yet. He wants Otis, and he's like, you turned my kid against me. So that was so important that Peter snapped at Hank, and this would give Hank not even a thought now that he was gonna not even care about what happens to Danvers here. Hank literally shoots Otis twice, kills him, but this is where, thank God, Peter was in that shack outside and heard this. And this is the crossroads, a big moment I predicted from episode 1. Are you going to choose your blood with your father, or are you going to stick with Danvers? And that's why Hank is crushed. And it props to John Hawkes here, acting-wise, because he shows that in his face so well when he sees that Peter is not putting the gun down at him. And that's why he says, you should know something. I didn't kill Annie K. I just moved her body. And I love they threw in the line, he says, blood is blood, Peter. Remember that. I love they threw that line in because it's making a good message to show about that, where like people will always say that to people to justify, to keep doing something bad they're doing. Like, oh, well, you're my family. You're going to back me up in this one. A lot of times that's not the right thing to do. Peter absolutely does the right thing here, because when Hank is such a sicko to put his son in that place to shoot Danvers and make him make that choice, and Peter shoots him in the head. And thank God Navarro showed up because she talks some serious sense into Danvers here, who also is shook up by this completely because she's not thinking straight to call Connolly. And Navarro's like, no, like, hell no, don't do that. And it would have totally screwed them all over. So she knows they got to cover this up. And she also reminds her, Hank was sent here to stop us from finding where Annie died. We are this close, she says. So reminding Danvers what the goal is here, what the real thing this is all about. They're so close. Focus on the goal. But Jodie Foster's acting, the best piece of acting we've seen the whole show is when she realizes Peter has to clean this up by himself, clean his own father's body up and get rid of it, and how it breaks her heart. Amazing. It's an awesome end because you see Navarro and Danvers into the storm they go. It gets you really pumped for the finale. I just hate the credit music here. Save Tonight, the emo remix. What are we doing? But overall, I'm giving this one a 9.4. Mostly, I loved it. I pointed out those little nitpicks I had about the reveal of Clark and she's awake, and now all of a sudden Danvers connects to where she could have when she first saw the video. But so much to love about this episode. I really think this is felt like episode 1 and 2 again in quality and focus, and makes me so excited for finale. I really think the Night Country is going to have to do with the pedophilia stuff from season 1, because it just makes so much sense and would feel like a big payoff and like something bigger, because we've got so many reveals here that it can't just be they find what they found in this episode and that's it. Like they find Annie and some crazy supernatural thing killed the researchers. Like I want big stuff, and I think that would be the big hit. And maybe it's Peter. Maybe Peter's involved. I want someone else involved too. So we'll see. But I'm pumped. I really like the writing here too with the character, especially Danvers' character, especially Peter's character. That all felt really coming full circle now. Let me know what you thought down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, theories. I read every comment. I try to respond as many as I can. Hit that sub button so you don't miss one of my reviews of True Detective Night Country. And make sure to check out my X-Men channel as well. I cover everything X-Men. And I'll see you next time.